I'm here on behalf of CESA because for several years now I have been helping, advising a great client, Primus, located right across the San Mateo Bridge, Commissioner Peterman, right over there, 30 people working. It's a great company and in its efforts to navigate the challenging parallel long roads of technology, regulatory policy, and market seeking. But I'm also here speaking as a veteran of 37 years in the California energy business. And in that business, I've been on the front lines of LNG, gas deregulation, electric deregulation, energy crisis, utility bankruptcy, market manipulation, pioneer renewable companies like Luz, the first large-scale solar energy company, pioneer advocacy groups like CERT, which Ralph Cavanagh and John White organized in, I think, 1990, three of us. The TUG group in DC, none of you will remember that, but that was the beginning of the transmission unbundling effort. So I'd like to reflect a little on whether policies are working and also lessons to be learned. At times I'm optimistic about our future and just as often frustrated and pessimistic. And I guess I'm going to try to ask you guys the questions about whether all of this is working. Because none of us have all the answers. Not the regulatory agencies, not the venture capital firms. We're all looking for the answer. My focus is on policy, but my policy question is in the context of what I think is an existential challenge in our time that makes these times different than other times. After all, if all we were talking about here is a new app for the market, what we'd be seeing is the market determining the price and the demand for that. But instead, we're facing a very serious existential challenge, and every day, today on the news as well, the prediction of hurricanes for this coming season. The news is getting quite serious. The melting of ice is more rapid than people thought. The news, if anything, is worse. And so this is not an ordinary challenge. This is not like deregulation. This is climate change. And if climate change is your barometer, if climate change is what you're trying to solve here over decades and decades, then it's a different question. And it's so different that the problem, and I'm just going to tell you my headline ahead of time, is that we keep evaluating all our new widgets with an expectation that they develop very quickly and that they meet a market competition test. And that market competition test is to compete with industries that have been subsidized for decades, have had decades to control infrastructure and control the rules of the infrastructure. For example, 37 balancing authorities in the West, which act as gatekeepers to competition. And I could go on and on and on, and I have. That's been my experience. And so generally what I've seen is that policy makers have generally failed to emulate the market. And with an existential challenge before us, it's really a question whether they're up to the task. And I don't want to sound, I'm already sounding like a pessimist, but I'm not, because I believe that on the positive side, we have all the technology, we have the technologies, we have the answers. What we need is create markets and opportunities for those. And we need to do it way more rapidly than what we're doing right now. So let me talk a little bit about CESA, the organization that asked me to speak here. Forget about my biography. Oh, have to go the other way. Sorry, but I want everyone to focus on those 2 or 3 last sentences, actually. I'm glad I was able to put that up there. So, CESA, has many members, and with a very wide variety of technologies, ranging from early startups to established companies. And like other renewable technology associations, it's seeking tangible market results, real markets, and it believes that it is supporting renewable energy, helping it to integrate and to firm up, and it believes in coalition building with lots of stakeholders. And the key to both success and failure with organizations like CESA is that it can't cover all fronts. One of my disappointments in this industry from the beginning is the fact that it's so diversified that it doesn't seem to have the ability to combine forces. You'll see 25 different briefs being filed at every one of these proceedings. Everyone's got their little angle, and all these little angles are actually undermining the overall effort, which is to create a large market in a short amount of time. So I'm telling you some of my biases. Hello. Now, as Commissioner Wellinghoff said before, this was a study that he was pointing to by Sandia, which shows a tremendous potential for various applications of storage with a huge amount of value. We also know, and this is another truism in my opinion, that while some of the circles up here are larger than other circles, the value proposition actually changes. We're not going to know all the answers. Something that may look like it has tremendous cost benefit today in the market is going to turn out to be not as cost beneficial, while others that look like they were minor players become larger players. And so we need to keep room for the various applications. We need to make room to advance all of them. You've seen these charts as well. The signs are encouraging for electric storage. Factors such as the factor that Karen talked about earlier, the load shift profile, the load resulting from electric vehicles, rising energy prices, the variability of renewables, and the fact is the policymakers, particularly here in California and at FERC, are responding, and that's part of the good news. But this is the challenge that I had in the solar business, and one that is probably not that far off from what you're going to have. And I'm acknowledging my colleague in the audience, Arthur, who we worked together at BrightSource, and we developed this ridiculous-looking chart. But it's true. This is the everyday challenge that one has to bring along a renewable energy project. These are the kind of challenges that you're going to have. Just take a look for a moment at this chart. Look at all the agencies you have to go to. Look at all the congressional challenges you have. Look at all the FERC challenges. Look at all the states that you're trying to market it. And that was solar energy. That was large-scale solar energy. But believe me, when you get down to it for storage, it's not going to be that different. And I'm going to get back to that theme again. This is a very long road. It's a road that venture capital firms, and how many are there in this audience that represent that you generally have not been conditioned to live in this long road world. You're expecting the app to get on the market and to be bought by the market with a price to be determined by the market. And that's not what goes on here. One needs a tremendous amount of focus and patience. One also needs to combine with others who are somewhat sympathetic and make an overall effort, and that has not been happening. these are the kind of steps, and they're not necessarily in order. It's just sort of a recreation of the previous chart. Each of these takes time. And one of the questions I would ask you is, how long should this take? Given the existential challenge that we have, how long should this take? How long before we have a healthy set of companies with a wide variety of widgets that are tested in the marketplace, that find out who is winning and losing and determining what fixes need to be made for the next widget? How long should this take? How long do we take for this? 15 years? 3 years? How long a patience factor do the venture capital firms have? How long are they supposed to wait?
10 years.
10 years.
Venture factors threshold.
10 years, actually that's longer than what I thought I was going to hear. But I'm glad to hear you shout out an answer. These, and you know what makes the challenge very challenging and complicated for storage is that it does have a lot of applications. And with all those applications, there are a lot of rules. And what makes storage particularly challenging is the jurisdiction of each of those rules, ranging from all the way from your home to the grid. And everyone is going to want to have a piece of that. Everyone's going to want to deliberate. And you know, as a lawyer, I do believe in due process, but 10 years? Do we have 10 years? So, and the other complexity here is the different types of technologies with multiple applications. Put a jurisdictional overlay on those multiple applications. Ask yourself how many agencies are going to want a piece of that, are going to want to determine that. And this actually captures the different jurisdictions, the different revenue streams that can come from that, and the stacking that's possible that storage can provide, the stacking of services, but where that stacking of services is regulated by different agencies, all of whom have to somehow get there for a project. Get there at different times, taking different amount of times. And you can't really move forward. This is kind of the dilemma that we had with the Ivanpah project. We could have the CPUC approve our contracts one day, but the Energy Commission take 3.5 years to provide final approvals for a project. FERC could turn around for BrightSource and give it whatever approval it needed in, I think, 90 days. It's like that, and you can't finance a project without needing all of these. So look at all these different revenue opportunities, look at the potential benefits, and then ask yourself really the legal question, which is, who's going to have jurisdiction over these? We're lucky to be living in California. California's got, and I know this from having worked many years in this business, California has the smartest, most courageous, most resourceful legislators, agency heads, thinkers, labs, and as a result of this, we've had a very, very good start. 2514, as Commissioner Peterman talked about before, is going well, quite well. SCHIP program, the RPS legislation, all of these that are listed here are really giving California a tremendous boost for storage. And I want to show you later, I'm going to refer to this document, which just came out. I wish I had it in color so you could see it. It's the 2013 California Renewable Energy Innovation Index, which shows all the benefits that California is getting from this investment. It's a smart investment. And regulators and legislators are to be complimented for putting California on this road, and regulators should not be shirking from the challenges that we are hearing these days. Too expensive, let's take a step back, has it been worth it? I don't know that in an existential challenge world we have much choice, by the way. I really question whether the measurements we're using are really the proper measurements in an existential challenge. So what we're seeing in the 2514 context is really quite a good progress. And the cost-benefit preliminary results are 5 minutes, but I started like 10 minutes late. So I'm going to go where I need to go here. So this is a time frame, and I think again it's going to go well. From my perspective, the question is what happens after. This proceeding is going well. It's been very orderly, very calm, intellectual, great discourse. We've also had another decision in the LTPP Phase 1 decision that you could see up there, that where the commissioners took a very, very courageous step forward. Commissioner Florio said what I sort of say all the time, which is we need to move beyond paralysis by analysis with respect to energy storage, and I would say every one of our renewable challenges falls into that. We need to move faster. We've had very, very good early success with the SCHIP program, and we're getting a lot of projects. And if I move on to this, I have no doubt that renewable energy costs are going to come down over time. I have no doubt that over time everyone is going to see the value of storage, that in this climate change constrained world, people are going to realize that storage is going to be quite valuable. So what is it that I'm unhappy about? The good news is that we are on a path that has had notable success. Second, the good news is that we have the most enlightened, progressive, and brave policymakers right here in California. And the third good piece of news is that we have tremendous technologies that can address climate change in a relatively short amount of time, I believe. I certainly believe that about large-scale solar. I know that it's true of other technologies as well. And the challenges that Karen talked about before to blend, to integrate these are completely solvable. And I also know, based on this index, this document that you all ought to be looking at on the web, that this has been good for the economy, for jobs, for emissions, for health, for patents that are emanating out of California companies. That's all the good news. Now the bad news. The bad news is that I think that right now climate change is winning. Do I know that as a scientist? No. What I do know is that this is a very long road, and it's taking too long to bring these technologies to the market. And from the point of view of a venture capitalist, the valley of death in this country is way too long. We can't expect financial investments to keep being made in new technologies when it takes 10 years. It just doesn't work that way. And all the others on the other side have got gazillion dollars in capital all ready to go to maintain their hold on the market. So you really have to sort of say thank you, venture capital firms. Thank you, Silicon Valley, for putting money into us. When do you want your payback? 10 years? How much of a payback? Don't know. The market is capped. The price is capped. I've got to compete with natural gas. It goes up and down. What am I going to do? Please tell me some kind of a when do I get to charge market price? When do I get my permits? That's what a venture capital firm is going to ask. And it's very difficult to kind of come back with answers to that. So here's the next piece of bad news. California is pretty much the only market, as I learned from going state to state to state to state. Guys, this is only basically happening in California. And I completely understand why policymakers are kind of saying, hold on a minute, we expected the other guys to kind of go along with us to create other markets. But they're not. Because ultimately it comes down to creating a national set of requirements. A clean energy standard. A carbon tax. A carbon market. It isn't Quebec and California, which is what it is right now, but in fact a broad, wide market where you can really do some trading. An imbalanced market that breaks through barriers. All these are going to require national initiatives. And on the pessimistic side, you'll forgive me, you know, when I see how difficult it's been to get transmission built, to get permitting done, when I see incentives like the investment tax credit that only lasts for a few years, and in the scheme of things, to have it expire in just 2 more years or 3 more years, given the amount of time you need, given the lack of an ITC for batteries, for storage, it's a pretty dismal future, particularly dismal near-term future, particularly when you look at the end of 2016, when a lot of these are going to expire, including the property tax exemption for solar that I was so proud to get a few years ago. So the news is good in California. The news is not particularly good outside. And I would say the next piece of bad news, and I guess I would level a little bit of criticism at California for this, is that we don't really have a multi-year roadmap. We have a number of proceedings in California. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how they even relate to each other. Resource adequacy, capacity, the flexible capacity markets, the RPS, the RFOs, the RAM, the FIT, all these different ones. And what I see is that none of them are being compared to a dashboard. And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a 2050 dashboard. I'd like to see a dashboard that sort of says, here's how we're doing to accomplish our 2050 80% reduction. Here's how we're doing. And here's how we're doing. And your particular proceeding needs to make sure that it's compared to that. That's the dashboard. How is your proceeding going to shape that? So that when you go out for an RFO, what's it doing to emissions? When you decide that you're going to keep these once-through cooling units alive for another, I don't know how many more years, what's it going to do to that dashboard? And I don't see that. I would like to see that in California. I'd like, you know, when I was just coming out of law school, we had the environmental impact statement. I don't see that when it comes to climate change impact in California, and I'd like to see that. Our policies take too long to develop. Look at the feed-in tariff. Look how long it's taken. And that is a fantastic incubation policy. It's just taking too long. RAM has been, the RAM bidding program has been really good and is developing lower prices. But it takes too long, and there isn't enough of a market for it. And that's my next recommendation. You need to develop, I think California needs to develop real incubation markets. I don't know that we should even call it incubation, but it needs to create enough markets. If what I hope comes out of 2514 is, yes, these following applications have the potential to be cost beneficial. Yes. Now, we need to make sure that there are now enough opportunities for companies out there to either contract with the utilities or to have the utilities buy their systems and rate base them. And we will allow you to rate base utilities, even if it is a little bit more expensive. But we want a sizable amount. I'm not going to tell you how many megawatts it should be. What I do know is that the feed-in tariff is too small. The RAM is too small. For a state that is facing an existential challenge, we need to create larger incubation markets. And we need to make sure that every one of these proceedings is comparing the results of that proceeding to, let's call it an emissions, or it'll be a complicated dashboard, but it is a dashboard. Look at this study that I waved to you before. So I'll throw out just a couple more recommendations from a guy who's a lot older than most people here in this room. One is that I don't see that we have any choice but to start seeing the RPS as an 80% RPS, not a 33% RPS, and to base all of our policies on that. That'll create a market, by the way. I've already talked about the incubation, faster and more. I think we need to start getting done with our proceedings more quickly. We need to really focus on the federal government, and I'm going to come back at the end to the politics of this. Focus on the Fed in terms of tax credits, MLP reforms, an infrastructure bank to make it possible to finance these projects, and to have these impact statements. I want to just kind of end it with the biggest lesson of my career was actually in 2010, when the Republicans took back the House. And what you saw, and I'm aiming this right at you guys who live in Silicon Valley, was a running to the hills like you cannot believe. The moment that the Chamber of Commerce and the oil companies sort of said, no, don't have room for that subsidy, but please keep going with our subsidies. We didn't even hear from Silicon Valley. Those of us who went to Washington, where were you guys? Why weren't you lobbying? Why weren't the environmental organizations combining and lobbying hard on an RPS? Why wasn't solar and wind and storage and everybody else combining in one big meeting with the key senators instead of arguing with each other all the time? And that's what I see in this industry. That is a hallmark of this industry. You all go and get your own lawyers for your own particular technologies and get your own lobbyists, and the environmental organizations hardly ever find an individual project that they like. There's always something wrong with it. And no one is kind of looking at the kind of fight that we've got. And the fight we've got is hardball baseball like you've never seen. You have to be prepared to fight very hard in the next few years. And you can do it, but you need to combine. And you need to look beyond your individual interests. And that's how we win this climate change war. Thank you.